All right, what's going on, y'all? So welcome to another episode of Full Circle Podcast. The July jobs report, down from expectations. We're going to cover a little bit of that today, talk about what that means for the economy and what that means for you. Also, Donald Trump goes ahead and fires the BLS commissioner who broke the jobs report. What does that mean for the overall tone of what truth looks like and basically how we are taking in truth, how we determine and interpret that coming down from the top all the way to us? And then finally, we'll talk a little bit about the trust crisis that we're having in the United States in terms of politicized reporting, truth in the media. And also, I just want to touch very, very briefly on this Sydney Sweeney American Eagle jeans controversy that's going on. So I hope you will stay tuned for all of those things. Before I get into this, as I always say, I love the support that I'm seeing from y'all, whether it be on social media, emails that I'm receiving, DMs, conversations that I'm having with people in person. And so I just want to let each and every one of you know I appreciate your support. But if you're watching this video right now, if you've been listening on Spotify, Apple Music, wherever you get your podcast, and you haven't subscribed to us, I don't even know what you're doing. I don't know how you've made it this far, but go ahead, click that button, leave us a comment, like this video, share it with a friend, and go ahead and subscribe. We'll be back next week, every single Wednesday with new episodes. And once again, as I love to tell y'all, it is always free to support a nigga, okay? Unless you want to do more, which we also appreciate. So thank you again in advance. All right, so getting into it. Man, this is a tough one, but we got to get into it, so let's do it. Right now, we're looking at some numbers from July's jobs report. Now, if you're somebody that is out there and you are actively looking for work, this is probably not going to be exciting news for you to hear, but we got to go ahead and, just tell the truth anyway. So I'm going to go ahead. I got my laptop in front of me right now. So I'm just going to talk to you guys a little bit about what happened. So the jobs forecast, or the jobs numbers, came out for the whole month of July. And right now, what we looked at least, that was forecasted, was 104,000 jobs that were supposed to have been gained in the previous month. What actually ended up happening, 73,000 jobs were added to the market. Now, the problem with this is that's 33% below expectations. The unemployment rate is still kind of holding steady around 4.2%. I believe last month it was like maybe 4.1. So it's only risen a little bit. I'll double check those numbers to be sure. But the problem with this is showing a bit of a stalling in the American economy, especially when it comes to the job market. Now, to give a little bit of extra context about why that is also following a more negative trend, June's numbers, which were originally at 147,000 jobs, were revised downwards at a loss of 14,000 jobs. And then May's numbers were revised downwards at 144,000, but it was at a loss of 19K. So those combined months together make for a combined downward revision. A downward revision basically is when they go in and they double check and make sure that the numbers that they're receiving are actually correct, job retention, so on and so forth. And that downward revision is basically saying, hey, these numbers that we actually thought were coming in, we're actually going in and we're revising the numbers to show accuracy on all fronts. And so they went and found out that there were at least a couple of thousand jobs, about a couple tens of thousand jobs in these 2 months that were not, that they had to revise downward, or essentially show that these are not, fully accurate after doing all the reporting and numbers, which, they always do. This is a combined downward revision of 258,000 jobs, okay? Now, health and social assistance seem to have added 73,000 jobs, so that's probably where the bulk of these jobs are coming from. But manufacturing and government jobs have declined. And I've talked about this before on the podcast, that we have tons of manufacturing jobs in the United States, right? but because of the fact that many people are not either qualified to do these jobs, they're not interested in them, or given the fact of what's happening right now with all of the efforts with immigration and deportation, those jobs are not seeing a lot of, interest. They're not seeing a lot of interest in hiring, even though companies are desperate to hire these people to fill positions. And so you might say to yourself, okay, well, what does this mean? Well, upon hearing this news, CNBC reported that the Dow dropped about 400 points, of course, because this shows a bad signal for the short-term economy. It shows that companies and business owners, CEOs, when they're projecting the future in the short term, they are not confident that the way the economy is moving, a lot of the decisions based off of tariffs, they're not confident that this is showing a strong or positive move in the economy. Now, Donald Trump has, tried to, get Jerome Powell, who is the Fed chair. The Fed is supposed to act independently of the government. He's tried to get him to go ahead and change the interest rates. But in many ways, if the economy was doing well, a sign of wanting to change the interest rates would literally be that the economy is having a problem and that you would have to do so. So this administration has consistently and confidently stated that the economy is doing well, that things are on the right track, that tariffs are going to be good for us. Donald Trump has, many ways said that he is a tariff guy. But then if that's the case and we see these jobs numbers, as well as looking at the fact that he wants them to change the interest rates, this does not hearken unto a positive economic standing or us moving in the right direction. So what does this mean right now? Well, revisions are currently showing that there's deeper weakness than what headlines are really showing us. And to give a little context, excuse me, on that, there's a little bit of an article that I have here, and I just want to go ahead and read that to y'all, just so you have a little bit of context. Because once again, as I said before, context is very, very important. I don't want to just be out here giving you guys, information that's not accurate. I don't want to be out here adding to the noise. Okay, so just give me 1 second. All right, I got to pull this one up one more time. All right, perfect. So this is just a couple of things to just explain to you guys essentially what's happening. So as I mentioned before, this is helping to confirm that our economic engine is sputtering. This is from CNBC.com. This is from a quote from Luke Tilley, who's the chief economist at Wilmington Trust. He says, "We are in a broad economic slowdown. Whether it translates to a recession or whether it translates to a recession or not is the question that I'm asking now." He said the labor market is, quote, key, and it's hard to gauge what is going to happen. Okay. Now, there is a 50-50 chance right now that Wilmington is showing that the United States will slide into a recession. Okay. And Luke Tilley is citing concerns over the longer term hit from tariffs. As we've talked about, we talked about it months and months ago. This could depress consumer spending, which has driven 68 of all economic activity in the first quarter of this year, as well as business investment and hiring. Now, the Trump administration keeps saying, oh, but look at all this investment. These companies, they're investing, trillions of dollars. Those are essentially just pledges. Every time Trump keeps talking about how he went overseas and he got trillions of dollars in a couple of meetings from Saudi Arabia and all these companies, those are just pledges. Okay. They're not deals set in stone. They're not with, black ink on a piece of paper where it's been decided. These are just pledges. And at any point, those pledges can change. Okay. So this is something to keep in mind. It's almost like if you go and I'm hoping this is a fair comparison, but if you go and you say, hey, listen, maybe I don't have a ton of money in my bank account, or I do, but I want to go ahead and I want to maybe use a routing number and an account number to draft it out of my bank. That is you essentially pledging, and the company is believing in good faith that you are going to have money in your account, that when they go through your bank, they can deduct that money. Well, if you go and deduct that money or if they go to deduct that money, but there's no money there, well, then of course you get, you get an overdraft, or you get some sort of like a notice on your account that you did not, that it did not go through. And I know some of you might be listening to saying a bank using a routing number and an accounting number to withdraw stuff. I only use Apple Pay or my credit or debit card. But essentially, that is to affect what is happening right here. A lot of these promises or these pledges are not physical deals. And Trump is walking around waving these pledges around like solid, solidified, economic deals, when really we don't have anything that we have fully solidified with these countries. And so we're going to keep monitoring this. As I mentioned before, I do always like to look at some of the bright side of this. Kind of rough. But right now, as we're looking at, it seems to be that, the picture is not super dire yet. The GDP has increased to about 3% in the second quarter of the year. So it slightly is vibrant to the degree, but right now we are having a weaker second half of the year. And the problem with this is that if people are not getting increased wages, or they're not being hired for jobs, or businesses are nervous about where the economy is going, people will cut back on spending, businesses are going to cut back on their investment, and the economy at that point can land in a recession. So I just want to be honest with you guys about, what I'm seeing here. This is a below potential pace that the government's that the economy is moving at, and the government is obviously taking note of that, whether Trump wants to spin that any particular way he likes. But at the end of the day, what we're looking at right now is the numbers don't lie, no matter how you want to move it or spin it. And we got to be honest about that. What I want to talk to you next about is Trump firing the BLS commissioner for releasing this report. Now, Ann Walker was the BLS commissioner who, as I just broke the news to you, in case you haven't been paying attention or maybe hiding under a rock or trying to stay from the news, whatever. But Trump fired BLS Commissioner Ann Walker within hours of her releasing the 73,000 jobs numbers report, as well as the downward revision information. And the problem with this is, and the White House says this, quote, "We refuse to tolerate inaccurate data that damages American strength." The problem with this particular issue is, if these numbers are correct, which we have no reason to believe they're not, that they're not motivated by politicization or anything of the sort, because Trump was praising this very same jobs commissioner, or at least praising the report that showed positive numbers. What is nerve-wracking about this is that you have a president who believes that if the numbers do not match what makes him look good, they talk about how it undermines American strength, but really what you have is you have an authoritarian-like figure who doesn't like to look wrong, who doesn't like to admit, hey, listen, maybe we're wrong about the direction that we're going on American policy or economic policy, tariffs, whatever you name it. And so instead of admitting that and saying, how do we fix this, right? Because true leadership means that we're going to make mistakes, but not this guy, right? The narcissism and the unwillingness to admit defeat or look like you've made a mistake is driving this president to try to make these numbers look better than they are, and is firing somebody simply for being accountable, simply for showing that these numbers are not good. Now, the problem here is a lot of Republicans, while some are dissenting, a lot of Republicans are in line with the president. You have Fox News out here that are cheering accountability, while the New York Times is saying, hey, if we're going to be out here punishing people for reporting proper numbers, that basically means that this could be a very, very dangerous move against integrity of data. Okay. And so what the issue here is that with nobody to stand up and speak the truth on these matters, what do we do? Because if we're losing integrity over numbers coming out that the president doesn't like or someone in charge doesn't like, how do the American people, how does somebody like you and somebody like me get the facts? on these matters? How do we know what is true? How can we trust with all the things that have been happening, whether it's the Epstein thing where they're finding, a minute or more on the prison tape has been edited, where they're finding that Trump is saying there is no Epstein files after saying there were Epstein files. When people are coming out from the White House and saying, hey, listen, there are reports of certain events that are happening that are totally true, and they're being fired or they're being removed, how do we then trust the information that is being given to us? And so we're just continuing to see from this president and this administration a lack of accountability, a lack of honesty surrounding what the truth is. The president continues to say that the election in 2020 was stolen from him. And there's just these repeated narratives about things that years later, even after winning, he is repeating this false narrative. We have to come to terms with the fact that if we continue to look and point at everybody else, and if we're continually hearing that everybody else is lying, that everybody else is not true, should we not at some point, as intelligent, educated, and people with some sort of common sense, maybe you're not the most educated person out there, but you might have at least a granular amount of common sense, if not more, should we not be able to look at this and say, okay, if you point the finger and everybody else is wrong except when they agree with you, if that was anybody else in our corner in sports that we went to school with, our friends, would we not just call them a sore loser? I think it's worth us looking at that. At the very minimum, it's worth us taking a look at that. Senator Mitchell from California said that this was a, quote, chilling attack on truth. Senator Harman from Texas said if the numbers don't add up, heads should roll. So once again, this is showing you, of course, the deep divide in the Republican and Democratic Party about issues that, once again, this is just data, okay? This is just data and numbers, and we'll continue to follow it for you. I did want to just touch very, very briefly on this before we move to our final segment. Right now, 49% of Americans approve of this firing, while 47% disapprove. That's a pretty close margin. And a lot of this comes from a fear of politicized statistical reporting, right? Where you have, MAGA Republicans and those that are all the way on the right saying this is very, very politicized. Everything against Trump is politicized. While you have Democrats saying, listen, you don't have a problem with the numbers when they're in your favor. Why do you have a problem with them when they're out of your favor? There is a possible congressional inquiry into this. Much of this to me sounds just like a lot of political bluster and showmanship. And once again, my biggest concern is that if you can fudge this, what's going to happen when the 2026 midterms roll around? Because a lot of it is going to be framed surrounding results versus what people consider to be reality. And once again, this is putting a major gap into truth about what people know and believe. And if we don't trust anything, because no other president has put this much distrust in our institutions, in our media, and also in our statistical data, even from organizations that are not biased typically. This is a major concern because if the people do not trust their government, they stop participating in government. They stop listening. They stop caring because they are like, well, they don't care they couldn't care less about us anyway. Why would we trust what they have to say? They're just lying to us. And this is what causes us to not take part and participate in our government. And a lot of this stuff is straight out of the authoritarian playbook. If you do any research about 20th century authoritarianism, I highly recommend that you look into ways that authoritarians gained control through soft power. We're used to the hard power, the showmanship, showing up with tanks and the military and coups and all that. But I really encourage you to do some research about soft power takeovers of authoritarian governments during the 20th and maybe even some of the 21st century, because I think it'll be very, very easy for you to see a lot of parallels and contrasts between what this administration is doing and also what has happened in times past. So I will hope that you'll be able to pay attention to that. Very briefly, I want to talk with you guys finally about this Sydney Sweeney American Eagle controversy. I don't want to give this too much attention, but it is very important because it does have political implications, and I want to talk about it briefly. So there was a fashion campaign, I believe July 30th, end of last month, with Sydney Sweeney in it. Of course, if you don't know who Sydney Sweeney is, she is a very, very popular, at least in social media and of course pop culture, actress. Now, to me personally, do I think Sydney Sweeney is like shoddy a little baddie? Not really. Like she's good looking. To me, she aight, you know what I mean? But that's not a dig on her. That's just me. That's my preference, right? Personally, I just don't think she's the baddest. But there's nothing I have against her personally. I think she's done a great job in shows from Euphoria. She was in a movie. I watched this romantic comedy with her in it. And I cannot remember the title of it right now, and that is going to piss me off. So let me just make sure that I, am properly talking about stuff here, because that's just, once again, everybody is up in arms about everything these days, man. And, just want to make sure I'm being accurate. Okay, Anyone But You. That's the name of the movie that she was in. Okay, so with that being said, I'm not going to tell you about this. There are a lot of people that are saying that, hey, this is just a harmless ad that's just a play on words, catchy, while others are saying this is totally promoting eugenics and is racist, that literally American Eagle is racist. Don't take my word for it. Don't take our word for it here. I am going to go ahead and play you guys the video that everybody is up in arms about right now. And then you can let me know what you think for yourself. Here we go. All right.
Me telling you to buy American Eagle.
Okay.
I'm not here to tell you to buy American Eagle jeans. And I definitely won't say that they're the most comfortable jeans I've ever worn. Or that they make your butt look amazing.
Side note, I used to work for American Eagle jeans. It's all right.
Why would I need to do that? But if you said that you want to buy the jeans, I'm not going to stop you. But just so we're clear, this is not me telling you to buy American Eagle jeans.
Sydney Sweeney has very jeans.
You see what I did there, right?
All right. So you might see that first one and be like, I don't really understand the controversy. What's the problem? Well, here is the one that got a lot of people up in arms, and I'm going to play that for you right now.
Genes are passed down from parents to offspring, often determining traits like hair color, personality, and even eye color. My genes are blue.
Sydney Sweeney has great genes.
All right. So with this being said, there were a bunch of people who took to the internet, they took to social media saying, hey, this is classic American purity. This is eugenics-coded nostalgia. They're basically saying that white people are the supreme. They have the best genes, the classic blonde hair, blue eyes thing, and that it's a play on, terminology, but that they're basically reselling to us through ads, textbook, eugenics in a racist format. There's been hashtags as eugenics chic, AE racist, and hashtag Sweeney out of touch. There's been viral outrage, calls to cancel American Eagle, people saying that they are a racist company. And of course, Sydney Sweeney herself saying that she would never want to be part of anything that hurts. Look, I just want to say this for the record. I am a very, very big believer in if something is racist, if something is evil, if something is negative, we should call it out for what it is, and we should be fighting those fights. But I do have to say, I think if everything becomes outrageous and if everything becomes racist, we have missed the point. And to me, I'm looking at this, while I do think that the video is a little bit kind of like it can be perceived in that way, and while I do believe that they were definitely looking to try to get some sort of attention with the video to maybe stir up some controversy, I do believe this is a bit of a reach. And the reason why I say that is because that is such a play on words were genes and all the other stuff. Would I have gone as far if I were the person in charge to talk about genes and traits being passed down? Probably not. But to me, it just sounded like some people who were having fun in a boardroom with, a couple of terms and some ways to basically throw that in there. And then they got Sydney Sweeney and were like, oh, great, let's have her do this because, she's a relatively good looking person and then she can be part of this and it would sell and make a lot of money for the brand. If anything, if we're being honest, the controversy is probably helping American Eagle because they've been a company that no one's really talking about. It's largely not in the press or really in like the fashion conversation, okay? With that being said, I do truly believe that if certain things are racist, then we actually have to highlight that and talk about it. But there are some things that I think we got to die on the right hills, okay? We've got a battle that's going on out there with ICE stuff that's happening, with a president that is trying to rewrite the rules of history, trying to put Confederate statues in D.C., and people who are losing their jobs. They can't get jobs. They're losing health care. They're not having wages. There are greater battles to be fought, and I think we've got to focus our attention a little bit on what desires and what is in need of more of our fight. So if you have any thoughts on this, feel free to let me know at Full Circle Pod on Instagram, at _ Full Circle Pod on Instagram, and at TikTok at Full Circle Pod. Leave us a comment. That is all the time I have for today. As I always say, have a great one from your favorite brother. We'll see y'all next time. Peace.